Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another live edition of the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner. And I'm your host, retired Army First Sergeant Paul Holbert. And I want to welcome the audience back in with us to our show that highlights veterans, their careers, their experiences, and veteran service providers from all over the country. So we want to thank you for joining us. The other thing I want to mention tonight before we get started, which was really exciting for us, is that thanks to you, our viewers, and people sharing and watching the show, that the WGSN Veterans Corners was just recently listed as number 19 of the top 25 podcast to watch by FeedSpot Media up here in Northern Virginia. So that's actually a credit to our audience. For those of you that are following and watching the show, following on Twitter and Instagram. So I want to thank our folks out there in the audience for that, because it's an honor to have that happen. And that means we are getting the word out. So once again, I want to thank you for joining us, because it does make a big difference. Now, as we always start out, we have great sponsors for the show. And I want to start out by thanking, of course, Quest Jewelers from Merrifield, Virginia. For those of you that have watched the show, you hear me talk about them all the time. They are excellent, excellent. And if you call Pete, if he's not there, ask for his brother Juan. Tell him you watched the show, and they will hook you up, and they will also give you a discount. So, please contact them. Go to their website, questjewelers.com. Take a look at what they got. They make some beautiful pieces, and I can tell you they can make you some beautiful custom pieces as well. I also want to thank Nationwide IT Services, located here in Fairfax, Virginia. NIS is a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business owned and operated by retired Army Warrant Officer C.K. Park. He and his crew are a group of professionals who are there to help you meet all of your business needs, whether it's training, IT support, security, program management, studies, whatever you need. He and his folks are there to help you. And I can tell you, not only does he support our show, he supports initiatives in the local community. And he also supports hiring vets, because almost 50% of his employee base are veterans. So we want to thank him for participating and continuing to sponsor our show. All right, so let's get into tonight's show. And I think we have something a little interesting for you. Tonight we have retired Army Colonel Mike Kershner, and Mike, who spent 28 years in the Army before he retired, of course, is a graduate of the U.S. Army Military Academy, West Point. He also has a Master of Arts in International Relations and is a graduate of the U.S. Army General Staff College. So the interesting thing is Mike, which I hope to get him to talk about a little bit tonight, spent most of his career in the Special Forces Command. So I think that will be interesting to our audience. And then, of course, Mike will talk about this a little later on in the second half, but after you retired, you actually was a CEO of a company and have moved around in different leadership positions and ownership positions in companies. So, we hope to learn more about that from you, but I want to thank you for joining us on the show tonight.
It's my great pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always great, because I always enjoy getting such a wide range of guests on the show. And I have to say, last show I had my first retired general officer on the show. And tonight, you are actually my first retired Special Forces soldier on the show, or officer on the show. So it's always great to have a wide variety, and our audience can hear a little bit about, your career and what you did, and, share some of the information with them. So I got to ask you first, though, what was your path going into the military, and how did you end up in the Special Forces Command?
Well, my path going to the military was kind of odd. I was a junior in high school, and I applied actually after my junior year. I applied to the military academy at West Point. I thought, oh, that might be fun to see if I could get in. I had no intention of going there. I lived in Colorado. I had I had a bunch of friends in Colorado. I had no intention of going, but I thought it'd be cool to be able to say, "Hey, I got admitted to the academy."
Oh,
And then I got a letter back saying, "Thank you for your interest in national defense, but you're about a year behind in this process." So I thought it was overcome by events. And then one night in February, I came home from actually from all state choir practice. Found a packet about 3 inches thick on the table. My mom said, "Yeah, this came today." And it was all these forms to fill out and orders to go to Fitzsimmons Army Hospital. I lived in Colorado to go get a physical. I thought, hey, I get a free physical, no problem. And I filled it all out and returned the paperwork. And at the end of March, I got a phone call at school while I was in class and got called to the front office. And it was the admissions officer from West Point and said, "We love your file. You're the kind of guy we want. If you're willing to make West Point your first choice, I'll get you a nomination." So
wow.
I'm standing there, had not thought about it very much at all. And I'm standing on my feet. And I said, "Well, yeah, I'll do that." And so I wrote to both my senators. One of them had a nomination, and I got admitted to the academy. I got my nomination about a week before I got my appointment, which is not the way that it's usually done.
Yeah. Well, I have to ask you though, living in Colorado, why not the Air Force Academy? Why West Point?
My girlfriend at the time asked me that very question, and
Yeah.
I told her the Air Force Academy is just a civilian school where you don't have to decide what to go wear to class. I want to go to a military academy. So
Well, I have to tell you, it's the reason why I laugh is because I have a younger brother who spent 8 years in the Air Force, and he did several enlistments and finally decided to get out. And of course, I used to joke with him all the time and about the Air Force being a quasi-military organization. All the jokes that the inter-service rivalries come up with and all that. And of course, my soldiers were well familiar when I was a first sergeant what Air Force gloves were.
oh,
Hands in the
absolutely,
pockets. Yeah.
absolutely.
So, but yeah, I was just curious, why you didn't end up trying to go to the Air Force Academy. So you went to West Point. That's that's a heck of a thing to do just on a whim like that, especially with the commitment.
Yeah, it was a big jump, and it took me a little while to wrap my head around what I had just committed myself to. But I never looked back. I mean, I was going to go there, and it never occurred to me that I would quit or drop out of the academy or get flunked out. It never occurred to me to do anything other than finish that and finish my requirement for the Army, and it just that was what I was going to do, and I mean that was the mission. I was moving out.
Yeah, I mean, well, my hat's off to you because, of course, I've never been there. I've seen enough about it, talked to enough, served with people who went there. My first battery commander, my first artillery unit after I enlisted, I went to 2ID in Korea, and I was in an FDC. And my first battery commander, the captain, was a West Point graduate. So, I was exposed to a lot of officers from West Point from early on in my career. So I know what a challenge it can be for people to make it through there. So my hat's off to you, my friend. That's all I could say. I thought I had a rough enough time with some of the schools I went to in the Army while I was in. Most of them were more physically demanding than some of them than mentally. But yeah, it's great to hear you talk about how you wanted to do that. It's just kind of caught me off guard though. Like I said, when you said, "Yeah, I just thought I'd give it a try," So how did you end up in the Special Forces Command?
It was interesting. I had been in both the Rangers and the Ninth ID at Fort Lewis, and one day I got a call. I was at the Yakima Firing Center on a mission, and got a call from Special Forces branch of all places. They said, "Hey,
Oh,
you're fully qualified as an infantry officer. Would you consider going to Special Forces?" And I thought that would be a great opportunity. It sounded intriguing to me. So once again, I said, "Sure, I'll do that." And and found myself on my way to Fort Bragg for Special Forces, and I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I was
Yeah.
in the infantry that was before Special Forces was a branch, and
Yeah.
I served in the infantry for about I think it must have been about 7 or 8. No, it's about 9 or 10 years before I branch transferred. But I served at Fort Bragg on a Special Forces A team. I got to be a Halo Scuba team leader, which is
Oh
not,
gosh.
you don't hear that very much anymore because guys don't have the opportunity to go to those schools. We were a
Yeah.
smaller organization back then. And, uh, and, uh, and then I served an infantry tour in Germany, came back, taught ROTC. And
Mm.
I had ended up going, okay, don't hate me, but I got a training mission and I ended up living on the island of Antigua for a year.
Oh my gosh.
And I traveled around the Caribbean training security forces in the Caribbean. I had a team of 4 Special Forces NCOs who worked with me, and I
Yeah.
worked jointly with a British team that was based on the island of Barbados, and we combined to make a big team, and we trained people all the way from Grenada over to Jamaica. And while I was there, I got my letter in the mail saying, "Hey, would you consider making Special Forces your branch?" And that was about a 5 nanosecond decision-making process,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I figured we were never going to fight the Russians in the Fulda Gap, but there were wars all over the place that Special Forces was going to be involved in, and I wanted to be where the action was. So I branch transferred, and again, never looked back. I had thought about that decision though.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind, you had mentioned something with a halo. If you don't mind, would you tell our audience what that is? Because there's a lot of folks out there that may not understand what that is.
um, hey, we call it, the real name for it is military free fall,
Yeah.
MFF. We call it HALO, which means high altitude, low opening, which
Yeah.
means you leave an aircraft at high altitude, you open your parachute very low, and obviously you have to get from one to the other. So that's where the free fall part comes in.
Right. Right.
It can also involve what we call HAHO operations, which is high altitude, high opening, where you jump at a high altitude, you wear oxygen, and you fly you open immediately, and then you fly your parachute to where you want to go. If you
Yeah.
want to go way offline of where the aircraft is traveling and stuff. So it was interesting. I mean, scuba school was a much harder school physically. There's fewer people who actually get through scuba school.
Yeah.
Military free fall, you basically have to fall face to earth and open your parachute.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was for me. I thought it was weird enough stepping out 1,500 feet above and just letting letting the static line pull. For me, that was thrill enough. Nothing above that. But no, it's so incredible to hear some of the things people don't realize that you guys do. And I remember my advanced class in 19 was it I'm trying to think 1989, was it 89? I can't remember. I had a staff sergeant in there that was SF.
Mm-hmm.
And was it, and you may have to help me remember, was Grenada right around that time?
Grenada had occurred in the 1983 timeframe.
Oh,
In October
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was in my other basic course. That's where it was.
And Panama occurred in '89.
Yeah,
No,
that's yeah.
88.
Well, he was SF, but he was a chemical, but he was tabbed. I don't know how active he was, at the time when he came through the school, but when that happened, they pulled him out of the school about a week before graduation. And of course, he had pretty much met all the requirements to graduate. But I remember him coming in and packing his stuff and saying, "Yeah, I got to go." So it's definitely. I'm sorry, you want to say something?
No, I said that can happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember there were times in my career when I was in the 101st. We get a call in the middle of the night, and I was still in field artillery at the time before I branch transferred and into the chemical corps. And they call us in the middle of the night. I was in was the 2nd and 31st Field Artillery at the time at Campbell, and next thing you know, we're sitting on an airfield, and they do something like that to us every now and then, but nothing like they do with you guys. I mean, it's not even close. The stuff that they put you guys through. So you can you share a little bit more with us? What else did you do? Other than get to parade around the Caribbean for a while. I mean, something you can share, because I'm sure our listeners would love to hear.
Well, I don't know if they'd love to hear it, but they're going to hear it.
Okay.
After I came back from the Caribbean, I went to Command and General Staff College, and I was negotiating to go back to Latin America. I wanted to go to Latin America. I was in the first CGSC, Command and General Staff College class.
Yeah.
That had guys who are actually crossed arrow wearers, actually special forces that had become a branch right before my class. So we were the first class of real special forces guys who had committed to special forces. And I wanted to go back to Latin America because that was where the war was. I mean, that was the Third World War, fighting the drug wars in Colombia and Venezuela and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was negotiating with Branch, told him I would like to do that. And my last assignment before I went to the Caribbean was teaching ROTC at San Diego State University, which was another nice tour. And I was negotiating for my next job. I wanted to go to Latin America, but I spoke German and Russian, and nobody wanted to go to the 10th Special Forces Group, which is focused on Europe.
Yeah.
Because their mission was nothing but special reconnaissance, which is not the most exciting mission there is. It's you spend a lot of time in holes, hiding, looking through small slits in the ground. Use the bathroom in baggies. You stay dug in. You never leave your little hole. And you live there for weeks, observing railroads and observing roadways and reporting on what you see. Not the most glamorous special forces mission there is.
Yeah.
So nobody wanted to go to the 10th group. I was negotiating to go to Latin America, and a bunch of us spoke Spanish in my class. 9 of us spoke it real well. And one guy was going to go. So they sent the senior guy, and they told me I was going to go to the 10th group. And I told him I didn't want to go to the 10th group. You guys owe me a good deal. And the guy I was talking to hung up the phone on me. He and I had gone to scuba school together.
Mm-hmm.
I called him back and I said, "Why'd you hang up?" He said, "Dude, you spent 3 years in San Diego and a year in the Caribbean. We have a sticker on your file that says, 'Screw this guy.'" He said, "You are going to get whatever is left over when everybody else gets their assignment."
Oh.
But I went to the 10th group, and the May before I went there, the Berlin Wall fell.
Yeah.
So I got to the 10th group, and Europe was changing dramatically. And I got to spend 6 years in the 10th group, and I commanded from company level up through battalion level. I got to do I would have been embarrassed to write down what I got to do. If somebody said, "Here, draw your dream jobs for the next 6 years," I would have been embarrassed to write down what I got to do. It was just so spectacular.
Yeah.
And then I left there, went to Panama, and ran. I finally got to the Latin America. I ran special operations. I was the operations officer for SOC South from 97 from 95 to 97. Came back and went to the Army War College, and then went to Special Forces Command as the deputy commander for the Special Forces Command for 3 years.
Wow. I mean, yeah, it's when I looked at your bio, I thought, wow, he's the whole career pretty much with SF. And, I just thought, wow, that's incredible. I have to tell you, though, it was interesting because, people get this idea of special forces and Rangers and stuff. And of course, it all comes from the movies that they see.
Oh, yeah.
And, the movies don't even begin to realistically portray you guys like you are. And one of the reasons why I say that is because now I spent 3 years as an instructor at Benning in my, when I was a senior NCO. And of course, I was around 3rd Ranger Battalion quite a bit. And they were full of young hula-hulas, as they call them. And in fact, one of them, after they got back from Somalia and were shot up, one of them came to me, he was a chemical NCO, but he was tabbed in 3rd Battalion. And he said, Sergeant, he said, "I'm kind of looking to do something different with my life." He said, "Could you use an instructor?" Because I ran the post-chem bio school. the NBC school. So, I took him in as an instructor, as an excellent NCO. But my biggest memory of Special Forces soldiers was when I went to the first sergeant's course at Fort Bliss. And there were 2 SF first sergeants in my class. And they were just 2 of the most down to earth, how can I say, for with me anyway. Of course, I know they're different around the units and have to be, just like most first sergeants are. But I mean, talk about just down to earth. They were willing to pitch in and help anyone. And I remember coming out of our BEQ we were staying in, and I couldn't get a rental car from my unit in Germany, but of course they had one. And I came out walking down the hall, and they said, "Hey, First Sergeant, where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going to go catch the shuttle over to the commissary." And he stopped me and he goes, Shuttle hell." He said, "Here," tossed me the keys to his rental car. He said, "Just bring them back when you're done." And I mean, they were great guys. They pitched in to help everyone that wanted or needed help with the class. And, people just don't see that side, I think, of the military special operations, because they get most of their information from Hollywood and, TV shows and things like that. And the thing I thought was amazing was, you guys are regular people, real people. You have lives, you have families, and for the most part, you're just like a lot of the other soldiers, and in some cases, just like other civilians, with part of your lives. And I don't think people really see that and understand that.
Yeah, I was so blessed to be able to serve in Special Forces, because I got to work with the greatest NCOs ever. I mean, these guys, they were just wonderful, wonderful soldiers. You didn't have to repeat instructions to them. You didn't have to follow them around. Yeah, I will admit, we didn't have a lot of people get in trouble for missing movement or for going AWOL. But if our guys wanted to get in trouble, they went for like cable news networks. They wanted the entire United States to know they were getting in trouble. But generally speaking, some of the most self-effacing guys I know obviously I spend a lot of time with these guys, but you're walking next to heroes and you would never know that they were heroes. Yep. Because they aren't going to tell you.
Yep.
But I mean, one of the first guys I met was a guy named Eldon Bargewell, Distinguished Service Cross in Vietnam, battlefield commission to a lieutenant, and he passed away, unfortunately, but he retired as a major general. And he was just a quiet, self-effacing kind of guy who was ready to do whatever it took to make the mission a success. I mean, he had I think 10 Purple Hearts. So he was incredible. So, but I served with a lot of guys like him. They were just incredible soldiers, and they would do anything for their comrades. The non-commissioned officer corps in Special Forces is second to none.
Yeah. I just wanted to point that out because, I noticed that being around some of them when I was on active duty, and they were just the epitome of professionalism. Mm-hmm. And you'd never know some of the things that some of them have done because they don't toot their own horn, and they're pretty middle of the road, I guess you could say, when it comes to dealing with other people. So, Mike, we're going to take a short break here. And when we come back on the other side, we'll continue our discussion. So, audience, we'll be right back.
Look forward to it.
All right, welcome back, everyone. And you've been listening to the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner. And we've been talking with our guest tonight, retired Army Colonel Mike Kershner. And before the break, Mike was sharing a little bit about his military experience and his time and his career in the Special Forces. And now, Mike, I know since you've retired, you served as a CEO and a corporate president for a couple of companies, and you just recently retired from the Cape Fox Corporation, I think, where you were doing some corporate work. So what were you doing? What did you find to do once you finally retired from Special Forces?
Well, once I retired from Special Forces, I cast a wide net. Ended up obviously in the defense contracting arena, but I held a number of jobs. I worked as a CEO, won a $250 million contract for my company, moved on to another organization, I spent a lot of time working in business development. I did a lot of training work for for biometrics in the Army. I wrote a manual called Commander's Guide to Biometrics in Afghanistan.
Oh.
And did a number of things that had to do with biometrics for several years, and then I moved on from that, and ended up my career being a president for two companies for the Cape Fox Corporation. And most of our work, the biggest parts of our contracts, were building drone operation centers and building and operating drone operation centers for the Air National Guard.
Wow, it's. I got to tell you, it's so amazing to see what they can do with drones nowadays, isn't it? It's incredible.
It is really. There was a recommendation for specific medals for drone operators and stuff a few years ago, and a lot of my Special Forces, I stay in touch with a lot of Special Forces guys on social media, and a lot of them were mocking it. Of course, I mean, it was beyond the Air Force inter-service rivalry kind of jokes. They were making fun of it. Oh yeah, you sit in an office and in an air-conditioned room and you're flying a drone, you're playing video games all day, then you go home. But the stress on those guys, hard for SF guys. SF guys, if you're in combat, and you're shooting people and you're walking over bodies and you're getting blood on you and splattering it, but you're hanging out with your buddies that night. You're talking about it when you're eating chow. You're working together about how you're going to mop up the operation tomorrow. You're working together as a team. Yeah. These dudes who are drone operators, they're flying a drone. If they're pulling the trigger, if they're blowing a target away, that is not remote control. They are close up and personal. They were looking inside the exploded open roofs of these vehicles to make sure that they did what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And then they go home and have dinner with their wife and kids. They aren't hanging out with their comrades who are working, who are dealing with this together as kind of a team.
Yeah.
These dudes go home and they hang out with their wife and kids, and then they go back and do the same thing the next day. And it's just, I mean, that is a whole different kind of stress. That has a whole different level of stress from what I was used to as a soldier. And I truly sympathize with the stress that those guys go through. It is very, very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I can understand that, especially, um, not having that outlet because when I was diagnosed with PTSD, um, and it was well beyond my retirement. I mean, I suppressed it for the longest time, and it finally raised its ugly head. And my wife told me, "You got to get help because I can't help you." And I was well beyond the military, so I didn't have that camaraderie or that comradeship of fellow soldiers. And I mean, it was great. The Army was good. They hooked me up with the right people, and I was able to get help. But yeah, you're right. I can understand if you have that outlet, or you have people that's in similar position, you have that outlet. I would think it does tend to make it much easier to deal with.
Yeah, and it really is. I mean, you have it's kind of an unwinding way, and at least, I mean, you have a lot of gallows humor and stuff that goes on, but the guys
Yeah,
corporately they deal with it together, and that really helps a lot. Uh, my my youngest son is a Green Beret, and he was an instructor at Fort Bragg.
mm,
And he came home and he was acting really strange. He was very short with his wife. He was very short with his kids, and that is not him at all. He is totally laid back.
yeah,
And his wife finally said, "Look, dude, you got a problem. You got to do something."
yeah,
And he went to it, and to his credit, he went to his commanding officer and said, "This is going on at home. I don't know what's wrong."
yeah,
They went back through the training tapes, and he had been too close to an untamped explosive. And of course, I mean, you're used to getting knocked down with explosions in special forces training. That's just part of the deal. Get up, move on. But he was real close to an explosion that was not as controlled as it should have been.
mm,
But to the point, two students were with him. And so they went to those students and they said, "Hey guys, anything going on?" Well, maybe. And so they found out these students were having the same problems, but they
yeah,
weren't going to self-report because they didn't want to they were afraid they'd get kicked out of school. I mean, my son was an instructor. These guys thought, "Oh man, I got to finish this course. This is part of my career." I
yeah,
mean, my son went and got help. They got help. And
yeah.
I was very proud of him for doing that, but it is an insidious thing, and you gotta just it's an insidious thing, and it's just really tough for guys to admit.
Yeah, I tell you, I've had discussions with a number of veterans on this very show about that very point, and about veterans not being willing to admit when they need help. Now, I wanted to ask you about, because I know you're doing some work with the American Veterans Vote organization
Yes.
here in Virginia. And if you would share just a little bit more about that with us.
I'm the regional coordinator for congressional districts 10 and 11 in the state of Virginia for American Veterans Vote. And our intent is to get every veteran to vote in every election, from school board elections all the way up to presidential elections. And most veterans, in our experience, are only voting in national level elections. But it's the basic elections at the local level that really make a difference. And what we are trying to do is get every veteran to vote in every election.
Yeah.
And one of the ways we're doing that is by trying to get them to register in Virginia, you can get a permanent absentee ballot mailed to you without an excuse. It's a no excuse absentee ballot, but you register and they will send you a ballot for every single election. We're trying to get veterans to sign up for that because that way they are guaranteed a chance to vote in the election. That way, if somebody comes up with some wazoo plan for keeping people away from the polls,
Yeah.
you get your vote in.
Yeah.
In the state of Nevada, there was a problem in the state of Nevada with a snowstorm. And because of the snowstorm, a lot of people who were going to come out to vote on election day didn't come out to vote. It was too much trouble.
Yeah.
There's a guy in Iowa who is running for office. He put his name in to run for the school board. he was too busy on the farm that day to go into town to vote. Had he voted, he would have won because nobody voted for that in that election. He would have won with one vote.
Oh my
But
goodness.
he was too busy at the farm to go into the polling site and vote. So we're trying to get veterans involved because, as you well know, we don't think that our oath expired upon our retirement.
Yeah.
We took an oath, and that oath is still active, and we owe it to the United States. A lot of American veterans. I mean, back when I was on active duty, I could probably name 70% of the heads of state of the countries in the world. But I didn't know who the local mayor was.
Yeah.
I marginally knew who the governor was, and there was occasions where I didn't even know that. We're trying to change that. We're trying to get American veterans involved in the election process at every level of the state, so that they can make their voices heard, because we think that they will vote for the things that we believe in, which are a strong defense and constitutional government.
Yeah.
Because the Constitution, the American Constitution, is such a beautiful thing. It's such a glorious piece of work. We'd like to see us get back to actually using the Constitution.
Yeah.
So we think that most veterans feel the same way, and that's why we're trying to get them to vote.
Yeah, I think it's such a worthy cause for the audience out there. There it is on the screen, AmericanVeteransVote.com. So especially, if you're from Virginia, you're a veteran out there, you should go take a look at this. I think this is an effort that definitely deserves your attention. So, I will definitely encourage the audience out there to go take a look. Even if for some reason, you're not in Virginia, you'd like to take a look, or you want to help or donate or whatever you want to do. So I encourage you to do that. Now, Mike, I want to ask you here before we're done, though. So I know you haven't spent, I know you've got a wife, you've got a son, you've already mentioned. So what do you like to do now when you're not busy, working for Veterans Vote, or whatever you're doing? What do you like to do in your spare time to relax?
Well, my wife and I love to travel a lot. I'm a dedicated scuba diver, so my wife tries to make sure that I go diving at least once a year. She wants to keep me current because she knows I'm going to be diving until I have to put the walker to the side to roll into the water to go swimming. So she wants to make sure my skills are kept current, that I stay on top of my skills.
Yeah.
And so we like to travel a lot. I do tours of battlefields for friends and for collections of friends, and for my church. I do tours of both the Bull Run battles, the Battle of Antietam and the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yeah,
which is entertaining to me and educational for a lot of other people. I just really enjoy it, and we travel whenever we can. We like to go places and just spend time together. That's what we do.
Yeah, I mean, you sound like me and my wife. Our kids are all grown out of the house, and I'm getting ready to retire from my second career at the end of this year. And we've been traveling for the last few years, and I'm a military history buff, so I enjoy that type of stuff too. Well, it sounds, I mean, the life that you've been able to lead, not only as a veteran, but now that you're retired, it's kind of like, I guess you could call it, for some people, it's kind of like the American dream in a way, with all the things you've been able to do, and all the places you've been and seen. But before we wrap up the show, I'd like to ask you one final question. And if you, based on all your experiences and all the things that you've dealt with, and all the things you've gone through in your life, if you had one thought that you wanted to share with either the veterans out there listening or just the audience in general, what would that thought be?
My thought would be that veterans owe service to the United States for the rest of our lives, and we could talk all day long about how to execute that service, but we really owe it to our communities, to our local communities, to stay involved, because we make a difference in every level, and it was my great honor to be able to walk in the company of heroes and to serve with some great, great soldiers.
Mm.
And I just want to return some of the blessing that I felt. The Lord has taken great care of me, and I really appreciate everything that I've been able to do. I get to travel a lot. I've seen a lot. I've done a lot. There's a lot of things I don't want to see again. And I'm just extremely fortunate, Paul. I lead a blessed life, and I can only credit the Lord for that.
Well, you know what? I want to thank you for that thought, because what you just said is something I've kind of mentioned to my wife on a number of occasions. The exact same thing. I told her, I said, I feel so blessed to have had the experiences that I had and be able to live the life I'm leading now. I mean, it's incredible that you said that, because I've had that same conversation with her. But it's true. It's very true. Well, I want to thank you, Mike, really, for taking the time to join us this evening. It's been great talking with you and having you on, and you know, the interesting part of finding out you just threw that dart and went to West Point, and that was pretty interesting. But I really want to thank you, though, for taking the time to join us, and thank you for spending the time to work on the American Veterans Vote. And I want to remind our audience out there, if you want to take a look, veterans, there it is, AmericanVeteransVote.com. Whether you're not in Virginia or not, go on there and take a look. Maybe you can donate. Maybe you can help with something. So please take the time to do so. And Mike, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much for having me, Paul. And I look forward to seeing your name on the roster at American Veterans Vote.
Yeah, I mentioned that on my last show too. I told them, with me retiring soon, maybe I'll get involved with some of what you guys are doing. So I got the invitation. Definitely did.
Okay, that's good.
All right. And for those of you out there in the audience, we want to thank you for joining us tonight on the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner. And oh yeah, thank you, CC. I almost forgot. My goodness. As you know, I was so happy about this conversation with Mike. I, kind of left out my information. So thank you. Veterans, you got to check this out. The annuity org, it's a financial and literacy organization for veterans. They will teach you in depth. The organization has a website that will teach you in depth about financial benefits for you, literacy opportunities, all kinds of things that veterans are entitled to at annuity.org. So I encourage you to take a look. For those of you out there in our audience, see what it is they have on there. I was reading through the website, and even me at my age and being as far out of the Army as I am, actually learned a couple of things. So check it out, annuity.org. Take a look and see what you can find there. They've got some great information. And I want to thank the audience for joining us tonight on the GoingSoloMedia.com and the Veterans Corner. And we hope to see you on our next show.